Technology moves at a fantastic pace, so much so that we're now very firmly into the cloud era. And with everything stored happily and securely in the cloud, there's now no need for old-fashioned business backup, right? Well, perhaps not right. We're joined now by somebody who has an opinion that that scenario is in fact dead wrong. Michael Davies is CEO of Continuity SA. With us, Michael, welcome. Good to have you on board.
Thank you, Chris.
You think we're kidding ourselves about all this cloud stuff?
Chris, not necessarily so. There's challenges in the cloud, and it's not a simple answer with regards to business continuity and what you do. There's a comprehensive answer which includes advisory around it. So cloud is part of your solution. It's not necessarily the solution. So if you think that the solution is only in the cloud, then we are definitely kidding ourselves, yes.
Let's just define what we're talking about a bit more clearly. I have a business. I'm protecting it against what kind of risk when we talk about business continuity?
Right. Business continuity is all about sustainability, is about keeping going. We have all sorts of disruptions in life. Just to name a few, particularly in South Africa, we have some political unrest, we have strike action, and that causes disruptions. And there's lack of access to offices, so people need to carry on working, but from where? So it's that kind of thing. We're very fortunate in Africa, and particularly South Africa. We have few natural-made disasters, but we have plenty man-made disasters, unfortunately. And those are more the ones that we have to deal with. So, for example, that's just lack of access. Or we do have instances, in our experience, we've had buildings burned down. So those are true disasters as well. And it's all about continuing to run your business.
Okay, now this sits at board level and it sits at CEO level, obviously.
Yes, definitely. Over time, especially with Dr. Mervyn King, his King 1, 2 and 3 codes, the good governance coming through, and also with the new Companies Act, it's placing more and more risk at the board level, and it's also placing more emphasis on directors of companies being responsible for their actions, taking care of that risk, and that includes business continuity.
Okay, so bring it back to the cloud. All of my stuff is stored up in the cloud, so if my building burns down, I'll just go and set up in a temporary office somewhere and get it all off the cloud. That's the way people are thinking, but that's wrong.
Well, it's a great idea if it works. Unfortunately, we live in a real world, and some of the challenges around this, and firstly, let's go back to the concept of offices, is people talk about mobility. And when we talk about business continuity, they say they don't need offices. If that's true, why do we still have offices in our normal work environment? And if you drive around, you'll see development of more office parks, meaning that people really do need offices. If I could give you an example of, and just a scenario, if we look at an organization of 1,000 people, and let's assume 500 of them are mobile, and they have connectivity remotely and things like that, and can work from home or Mug and Bean or any other remote place. You've still got 500 people who are office bound. And in the office bound scenario, it could be legal people, it could be the finance people, it could be HR. And generally, a lot of the activities are driven around an office environment. Now, if there's a disaster, and let's say there is a lack of access to their premises, they have to go to another place. And they cannot necessarily go home to work. They might not be able to hook up at other places. When I say hook up, I mean remote activity, connectivity. And they need a place to work from.
Okay, so how do I do this? Because I can't just duplicate my entire office infrastructure. That's impossibly expensive.
Well, it can lead to be quite expensive, but it doesn't have to be expensive. And this is where a lot of the BCM or business continuity management providers have a place in the market, because what they provide is all that infrastructure. And bear in mind, we're not just talking about work area recovery in the sense of offices. You could have boardrooms, you could have other meeting rooms, and in certain instances, if you have a disaster, you're also looking at a command center where some of the executive team can come in and take charge of the situation. And what happens is the providers of business continuity have a infrastructure, so have a building or multiple buildings set up, and in that building, the efficiencies are driven through, if a building is resilient, it has a generator, it has a UPS, it probably has water supply as well. So beyond the municipality supply, it'll have its own supply. And that is really then syndicated amongst a number of tenants or clients in this case. And further to that is the offering of the work area recovery, being the office seats, can be syndicated as well, thereby driving down the cost on those elements of business continuity.
Do South African boards, do South African CEOs pay enough attention to this, to risk mitigation?
Well, I'll be rather contentious and say probably not. We do have certain boards and certain companies that pay a lot of attention to risk, business continuity, resilience, but I think they're in the minority at the moment. However, it is changing. We've noticed in our 20 years of experience around business continuity that the level of attention at the board is gaining momentum, and I think it's largely due to new acts coming through, as I mentioned before, the King Codes. We've got the New Companies Act, and governance has been elevated at board level, and directors are becoming more responsible. So it is elevated to a board level.
And how does this play in the rest of Africa?
Well, it's quite interesting because we've always seen ourselves in South Africa as being slightly behind the West, and in terms, sometimes the awareness of business continuity into the rest of Africa has also been a little bit slower than in South Africa. The general level at a multinational company is very high. So where they operate in an African country, they'll have good levels of business continuity. However, the general consensus at the moment is that there's little need for it, or they do a very low level of business continuity.
Of course, the problem about business continuity is disasters never strike when it's convenient, as Fukushima, for example, found out. I'm thinking about a country like Nigeria, for example, which has a very large homegrown banking sector.
Yes, and quite right. Business continuity in the financial sector is very important. And again, it's the multinationals that are then driving this awareness and culture into the rest of it. And you will have some failures, and it's the failures that then lead all the rest to think twice about what they're putting in place.
Michael Davies, CEO of Continuity SA, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me.